I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Environment. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests that teach all of us a little bit about the environment. And the environment is obviously very, very important. We share it with every living being on Earth. And it's threatened. So this could be important. I think it's going to be interesting for you to listen to my guest. My guest today is Dr. Eric Curtis. No, he's not an MD, he is an engineer. And he's married to Dr. Felicity Harper. Well, she's a psychologist. But that's not why he's here. He's here because he's my son. I love him. He's retired. He's got time. And he travels. That's the last part that I'm jealous about. He's been to some wonderful parts of the world, and he's here to discuss them with us. And he's got some great pictures. So listen up and pay attention and meet Eric Curtis. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Well,
you and I share some places, except I'm having to confess you've been to 10 times the places I have, and I don't think that's fair. We're going to talk about Alaska on this show. Alaska has been a love of yours. As a matter of fact, you were born in Madison, Wisconsin, when I was in Whitehorse, Yukon, waiting for a bridge to be built that had washed out on the Alcan Highway, so I missed your birth. But you've never held that against me, have you?
I have not.
Can you say that for your mother?
I don't think so.
No. All right. People who watch this show know of my love for Alaska. Just outline some of the trips that you've made in Alaska.
Well, I've made 5 trips to Alaska so far, and actually I hope to get up there again this summer on the motorcycle. The first trip was back in 1977 when I was only 16 years old, and that was a family trip that you remember well, where myself and 3 younger brothers drove out to Seattle, picked you up at the airport, drove on up to Hyder, and then on up to Watson Lake, I think it was, before circling back down. That kind of gave me the Alaska bug. In 1983, some college buddies and I went up to Juneau, Alaska, and we got construction jobs and worked the summer up there in Juneau, and they had a bit of a construction boom. 1987, I took the whole summer off and motorcycled all over Alaska. Went up Fairbanks, Anchorage, Homer, the Seward Peninsula, Valdez, all over the place. Got as far north as Circle Hot Springs, which is just shy of the Arctic Circle, so not quite there. Went back on a solo motorcycle ride in, was that 2007? Just a quick spin over to Hyder and back, because I could only get 2 weeks off. And then most recently was just last June when I went up with 3 college buddies on a canoe camping trip in Prince of Wales Island and Tungus National Forest. So those are basically the 5 times I've been up so far. I'm hoping for many more.
Well, I hope you do have many more, in part because I live vicariously through other people's adventures more and more, and you bring back such great pictures, and the audience is going to be seeing some of those pictures. You mentioned Hyder 3 times.
Yes.
What does it mean to be Hyderized?
Well, Hyder, as you well know, because you were there the first time I was there, is a small, remote town in southeastern Alaska. It's hard to get to. And there's a tavern there called the Glacier Inn, I think is the name of it. And if you take a shot of what is essentially grain alcohol and you keep it down, that's called being Hyderized. And they give you a little card, and I've got 2 of them myself. I didn't get one the first time because I was only 16, but the 2 other times that I've been there, I've got Hyderized, and I've got proof of that. So
my recollection, and you can correct it, is that there were 1,000 $1 bills tacked to the ceiling in that bar. What's the story behind that?
Well, I don't know, other than they con every tourist who comes in to put a dollar bill up there. But yes, you're right. I mean, the whole place it's famous for being plastered with dollar bills. I don't know how that tradition started. Maybe you remember when you I think you put one up, right?
Oh, I did, but I'm a tourist. I fall for all of that stuff. But that first trip was amazing. And looking back at it, it wasn't very cautious on my part, but then I've never been known to be cautious.
Yeah.
I had a big truck, 4-door truck, probably close to a 3/4 ton or maybe a 1 ton. We put a box on it. We put a wooden boat on, and you boys did all of that. I was in a trial.
Right.
And then I had another case out in Seattle. So here we have a 16-year-old driver, and then maybe a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old or something like that. And you drove them out there.
That's right.
And I remember being in front of a big motel that had a lion in front of it,
I remember that.
watching you circle round and round, and you couldn't see me standing there waving at you.
Yeah.
But it was amazing that you were the only driver and drove those kids out there and got there and found me somewhere near the SeaTac airport, and then the fun began.
No, that's exactly right. It was a very exciting week, actually, that we took to drive through out to Seattle. I had only had my driver's license a few weeks at that point, but I was pretty comfortable with road trips, right? We had taken a lot of road trips as kids, and so the idea of driving cross country and reading the maps and stopping for gas and camping didn't seem like that big of a deal. So I didn't really think that much of it as we headed out, but we had some adventures. Going through the mountains and things that obviously I'd never driven through, just having had my license for a few weeks here in Oshkosh.
Well, your presence today is evidence that you survived.
We did survive.
And rumor had it that you were so irresponsible on the trip before I added some maturity to it, that you guys were smoking cigars, all three of you, as you crossed the Rockies.
Well, that's true, but I think that's something that you instilled in us. So a lot of my recollection is a box of Swisher Sweets and a general direction was all you needed for a road trip. So that's something that we kids had been doing for quite some time.
Well, that's the first trip, and I was in on part of that, but
Yeah.
you've done a bunch more of them. Let's take
Yeah.
our first break, and we come back. You can tell all of us, including me, about the trips that I wasn't invited on.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Environment. I'm George Curtis, and my guest is my son, Dr. Eric Curtis. Now, he doesn't run around claiming to be a doctor, but he is one, and he earned it. And he just retired from Ford in engineering, and he's had a great career. Lives in Michigan with his bride, Felicity, and they happen to be here in the Fox Valley this weekend to celebrate the 87th birthday of his mother, Judy DeBrew. And Judy DeBrew and he celebrated his birth while I was gone to Yukon on the way to Alaska on a little bit of mistiming. But she doesn't bring it up except when I meet her. Then it comes up occasionally and frequently. But I hope you have a great celebration with Judy, and I hope you have some laughs over your birth and my absence. But let's get to the other trips you made. The first one, you picked me up and I was allowed to go along. And after that, you've done all these trips without me. Tell us about the next one.
Well, the next one, so this was the summer of 1983, and I was still in college then, and some college friends and I thought we would go up to Alaska and just find jobs for the summer and have an experience, right? And what happened was one of our friends that we knew there had a brother living in Juneau who told her that there were lots of construction jobs in Juneau. So we thought, well, okay, let's go up and try that. And so there were 4 of us that drove out to Seattle, then took the ferry on up from Seattle to Juneau, which was quite an experience in and of itself, because it was packed with college kids heading up to Alaska to work for the summer. So it was a little bit of a college party scene on the deck of this boat. We didn't have a cabin because we didn't have any money, and everybody just slept threw out a sleeping bag and slept out on the deck, and it was quite a scene. So anyways, we got to Juneau, and sure enough, Juneau was booming from a construction standpoint at that point, because they had just finally decided to keep the capital in Juneau. So they'd been thinking they would move it to some central location for a long period of time. Finally decided it was too expensive, so forget it, we'll just keep it in Juneau. So all this pent-up demand for buildings and construction took off, and so it was actually fairly easy to find construction jobs. I sometimes call that my favorite summer, because just the adventure of going up, getting a job. We spent almost the entire summer living in a tent. The interesting characters you meet in a place like Alaska. We had a group of guys who spent all their winters in Hawaii and then came to Alaska for the summers to work. There was a group from Detroit, just by coincidence, that I got to know pretty well. Another group of characters from Vermont. And you just, basically everybody that you meet up there is a little bit on their own adventure, right? So you meet adventurous people when you're up in a place like that.
So you spent the entire summer working, making money,
Right.
probably higher wages than you would have made in Wisconsin, until you deduct the cost.
Yes, well, that's right. So the costs were somewhat significant, although frankly housing wasn't, because we were mostly just living in a tent. And just the specific job that I got, the wages weren't crazy high, but we were working about 70 hours a week. So you'd make it up on time and a half and getting a lot of hours in. They really wanted to, of course, make hay during the summer season, because it's a short construction season. So.
And how did you get back to Madison then to continue your education?
Well, eventually, at the end of the summer, I had to get back for school. So basically, just flew straight back.
What happened to the car that you took out to Seattle?
Well, that was actually your car. So that was one that we and some friends of yours were taking a load, I think, of furniture either to Spokane or back from Spokane, as I recall it. So we drove out to Seattle with that vehicle, but it was your vehicle.
Did I ever get it back?
I don't know the answer to that.
I see.
I never saw it again, but I don't.
And then how much time passed before your next Alaska trip?
Well, not too much more. So that summer in Juneau was '83, and then '87. Well, maybe I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I was in grad school at that point, and a student loan unexpectedly came in May. And I thought, I should just take the summer off, and we motorcycled all around Alaska, took the entire summer off and motorcycled around Alaska on that unexpected student loan that came in. So.
Well, I'm shocked you brought that up. I have 10 children, I claim. And I love all of them. And of the 10, you're the only one that never asked me for money. In fact, I remember saying, Eric, don't you need some money? Aren't you going to college? Is there something that you need? And you always said, I'm fine. Now I find out you borrowed money.
Well, I did borrow I did have some student loans, especially in grade school. Actually, undergraduate, I really didn't. But I was working in undergrad. And I was working in grad school too. But like I say, this loan, just because it was a little bit unexpected, decided to take advantage of it. So.
Well, you lived. I'm not sure the right term, but you kind of lived bohemian. I remember a winter saying, "Don't you need a coat?" because you weren't wearing a coat, and you said, "Well, let me go out and look at the metal building," and you took a World War II Soviet infantry coat I had there for just for laughs, and I think that was your winter coat.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of fancy usually, so whatever works. But
well, the other kids made up for it.
There's that.
Okay,
Yes.
what happened next on your Alaska adventures?
Well, then there was quite a gap before the next one, and this is when I was working at Ford, and it was hard to get more than a couple of weeks off at any stretch. But it was summer 2007. I got a 2-week stretch over 4th of July, and I just jumped on the motorcycle and rode to Hyder and back.
Okay,
so
that's a story worth a little more attention. So hold
Okay.
that thought. We'll take our second break and we'll come back to the motorcycle summer.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Environment. My guest, son Eric Curtis, has been to Alaska one time with his father and about 5 more times without inviting his father, and a couple of them involving motorcycles. Tell us about that.
Well, the one summer of '87 basically took the entire summer off. So it was a 13-week motorcycle trip, which was great. I mean, we since we had so much time, we took the long route. I mean, actually went from Madison down to St. Louis and Denver before heading back up. Went through Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks, went through Banff and Jasper, headed over to Hyder, got Hyderized, headed up to Fairbanks from there, on up to Circle Hot Springs, down to Homer, down to Seward Peninsula, Valdez, and then eventually jumped on a ferry in Haines and took the ferry down, well, not to Prince Rupert actually, and then motorcycled on down to Seattle, so, and back.
And did you have another trip before this recent fishing trip?
And another one in 2007, which was just a 2-week blast from Detroit, Michigan to Hyder, Alaska and back. So basically went there, got Hyderized, turned around and came back because I could only get 2 weeks off from my job at Ford at that point. So
Responsibility is a bitch.
My work really hindered my vacation schedule, yes. So.
But since you've been theoretically retired, you and some of the same pals that you were with on an earlier trip had the trip of a lifetime. Tell us about that.
That's right. So this was last June, so almost a year ago now. We decided we wanted to do some canoe camping. And we had actually read an article in the New York Times about a canoe trail on the Prince of Wales Island and thought, wow, that looks fantastic. And we looked into it, and after a little bit of study, we wound up with 4 of us, old college buddies that I've known since 1979, wanting to do some sort of canoe trip, camping trip, but we wound up doing a little bit of a different one that was a little bit, frankly, a little easier than the one that we had read about in the New York Times. So in June, we all flew up to Ketchikan. I spent a couple of days in Ketchikan, took a flight tour of the Misty Fjords National Monument, which is just fantastic. So you just take a small plane and they buzz you through the fjords. It's just gorgeous. Then took another ferry over to Prince of Wales Island, did a day of deep sea fishing, which was fantastically successful. And then did this canoe trip in the Tungus National Forest, just north of Craig, Alaska, so on Prince of Wales Island.
I have seen some fantastic pictures of that trip that made me very, very jealous. If somebody wants to pursue that idea, who should they contact?
Well, I mean, if the idea of the canoe trip, frankly, there's a lot of resources. Prince of Wales Island has an outfitter that can help steer you in various directions. Just the National Forest websites. You look up canoe trails. They have a whole series of what they call canoe trails in Tungus National Forest and several just on Prince of Wales Island. And some of them, the one we did, had a Forest Service cabin. And the biggest trick is simply reserving that in advance. They're very inexpensive. It was maybe $30 or $40 a night or something like that. But they fill up fast. They get reserved. So you really need to be plan ahead if you're going to try and do that.
Well, with all due respect, Eric, I've never thought of you as much of a fisherman. But you have some pictures of fish. Tell us.
Well, so one day we thought we'd do a deep sea fishing, and we went out with a commercial guide, and it was really interesting because he asked us. You know, frankly, all 4 of us are not real fishermen, and so he asked us about our fishing experience, and we're all like, well, not much. We're really out for the boat ride, is to the truth of it, and that worked out fine. Because we listened to what he told us to do, and he had a method, and this is how you do it. And we all caught massive king salmon, caught halibut, caught rockfish. And it was a hugely successful trip. And he said, frequently he will get so-called expert fishermen, but they're expert in another type of fishing, or bass fishing or something like that, where they're used to setting the hook in a strong way. And on salmon, you don't do that, because he said on a salmon they have a softer mouth, and if you do that, you'll just break the hook out. And so we didn't think we knew what we were doing. So we simply did what he told us, and we caught so many fish. He had a great time. Actually, the guide had a great time.
And after these half dozen spectacular trips, I understand that there's another one
Yes.
in the planning. What's that?
That's right. So in June, the plan is to take the entire month of June off and motorcycle. The point of this trip is not so much Alaska as it is going to the Arctic Ocean, but on the Canadian side of the Canada-Alaska border. So I'll be motorcycling up to Dawson City, and then from Dawson City, which is in the Yukon, I will be heading back northeast in the general direction of Inuvik and Tuk, which are small Inuit villages, but Tuk is actually right on the Arctic Ocean. So it's a little bit of a well-known rite of passage for what we'd call an adventure motorcyclist. So this is something a lot of the guys do as a bucket list, if you will.
Well, I don't think you're going to stop going to Alaska, because you've inhaled the special air of Alaska. What are some of the other thoughts that you would like to explore and want to recommend to our audience?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I love going up to Alaska, and I think one of the things that is important for people to realize is there's so many different places to go. It's massive. It is huge. Different places to go and different sorts of experiences, whether you want to just take a cruise up and see a lot of beautiful scenery, or you want to fly into a remote fishing lodge, or you want to canoe or camp or hike. There are just so many different ways that you can experience Alaska, and they're all going to be wonderful and unique, both for the scenery and the wildness of it, remoteness of it, but also the interesting people that you meet. I think every time I go up there, you meet different characters, because basically it's only characters that wind up in Alaska.
Well, Eric, we're out of time, and I've not seen a show go quicker, because it's such a fascinating subject. Your knowledge and your enthusiasm, and the fact that you're smart enough to enjoy your retirement and continue to go back and breathe in that rarefied air. I congratulate you. I'm jealous. I thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great fun.
I want to thank my son Eric for his generosity in having me on his Alaska show. I think this is going to be one of our more popular shows. I love Alaska. Those of you who follow this particular program know that. I might mention a couple of other modes of transportation. There are two major highways of driving to or from Alaska. The Alcan Highway that was developed during World War II when we were planning on an invasion in the Aleutian Islands that partially took place from the Japanese. Then a more recent modern Kasser Highway that's closer to the coast near Vancouver. And we have some great trains in Alaska, and there is nothing more relaxing and scenic than getting on a train and going from Fairbanks through the big park down to Anchorage, out the Kenai Peninsula, just relaxing, good food, good scenery, good times, and meeting a lot of interesting people. Try it. You'll like it. I'm George Curtis, and that's my opinion.